in Europe, also with work in Northern Africa and so on. But apart from this, she is the coordinator of the master program in quaternary and priestry. She's also the Secretary General of USPP.
Very nice.
She does work every time on everything, PhD programs and so on. And every time I look at her, she's relaxing and drinking a beer. So I think there is a clone hiding somewhere that is doing the work for her. Anyway, she's very nice. And the other Marta, you will let me know where she is someday.
Okay. So I'm the clone who will do this. As Luis said, this is not exactly my specialist field of specialization, but I've tried to adapt my presentation to the topic of the Apheleia of this year. So the idea is the following one. I will give you some basic knowledge, and we will discuss together the answer to these questions, because for the moment there is any answer or any clear answer. As first of all, thanks to be here, and thanks to Luis that organized once again the Apheleia seminar. So as your background are very different, you are coming from very different discipline, I think is necessary before to state what is the natural selection that Darwin defined. When you ask to someone that is not used to deal with evolution, and you ask what is evolution, what is natural selection, the first answer is man, or woman of course, adapt to environment. But it's the opposite. If you are not adapted, you will die. So the most known sentences of Mr. Charles Darwin, I'm sorry for the pronunciation in English, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. Because the environment where we are living is changing, the selective forces are changing. If you are okay in this situation, you will survive, otherwise you will die. Natural selection is a very sad process, because it's based on survive or not. So, as I suppose you don't know so much about Darwin, we will just go through his life to understand how he was able to do something that is so important and that still today it's the basis of our scientific knowing. Of course, we evolve a little bit. So, since when he was very young, Darwin was already interested in natural science. So, like all the young people, he was collected things in the nature. So he had a collection of insects, eggs, rocks, and he started to observe nature. Because it's by the observation of the nature that he understood this evolution. So how many of you was collecting things when were young? Only. And the other ones, what you were doing? Okay. So, of course, he went to school, and his father wanted him to become a doctor. And so he went to Edinburgh and started to study medicine. But when he saw the first dead to be sectioned, he said, no, maybe it's not really my final destination. And so his family told to him, you don't want to be a doctor, you will be a priest. Any other alternative? And he went to Cambridge to study, and of course as a priest, but he was at the end taking all the topics on natural science. And he graduated in 1831. Of course, his family was not so happy about his career. So he got an offer in the same year by the Captain Robert Fitzroy to make a trip, a scientific trip, on the beagle. This boat. And he discovered just after, because the relationship between Darwin and Fitzroy was very complicated. Both get a diary, and it's very funny to read the diary, because in the ones of Darwin you are reading Fitzroy, it's really a bad person, and so on. In the one of Darwin you read, in the one of Fitzroy you read, Darwin is very stupid. So it's complicated, because at the end, Darwin understood that Fitzroy was making this trip to demonstrate that the facts of the Ancient Testament was true. So Fitzroy was looking for evidence of the Bible, Darwin not. So, what has happened? He started to go all around the world, and this is the trip of a beagle, a very nice trip, and he started to observe nature in very specific places with a limited gene flow. And so he saw and observed, firstly, that there is a gradual accumulation of small random mutation. He saw that in somehow things were changing on causal basis. At that time, the genetic was not so clear as today, and Darwin didn't know the Mendel research. So in 1943, he finished the publication of the first book, Zoology of a Trip on the Beagle. And it's just after this publication that he started to define his evolutionary theory in a very, very long book. And it's there that is defined for the first time his evolution theory. This theory was presented at the Linnean Society of London, that is the correspondence of the highest place of something, so it's like the Oscar night of this time, by Charles Lyell. It's not Darwin who has presented this theory, because at that time one of his sons was sick. And in 1959, finally, his book, The Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection, has been published in 1,200 exemplars. And for that time, it was a lot. And all those books were sold in a single day. It's the first case of a sold out in the history of science. It was sold out for two reasons. From one side, the ones who were really interested in the theory of Darwin, in the other side, the ones who were joking about Darwin. You know all the caricatures that we have with Darwin, draw as us, a monkey and so on. We have to underline that in the first book, he was talking also about Homo. In The Origin of the Species, the Homo, it's treated in a marginal way for all the problems that happen. So how Darwin defined this theory? Basically, looking at the backs. Because he was seen in the Galapagos Island that some different birds, some similar birds, has different backs. Why? Because they were used to eat different things. And so he was asking why the same bird has to modify his back in order to eat different things. Because the resources in a closed environment are limited. If we are all eating the same things, for Eve today is nothing, until tonight. So if you are all eating the same things, of course, there is not food for everybody. But if we start to differentiate our alimentation, there is more food for everybody. So these birds have different backs because they are eating different things. Some one are eating leaves, some other are eating noci, nuts, vermi. Well, very well. You speak a good English. And so they have the possibility to live all in the same place, but with different ecological niche. Before to go on and to explain what effectively is the evolution theory, we have to spend 2 seconds about Erasmus Darwin, because finally Darwin has taken some idea from his grandfather. His grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, it was a scientific from all the point of view, because it was a naturalist, it was a poet, it was a writer, and so on. Probably he didn't cook, because at that time a woman was doing that. And Erasmus Darwin, finally, it's the first one who defined a theory of evolution based on natural selection. But he wrote it down in a poem. If you have the occasion, read some part of this poem, because it's very funny to read the idea about evolution in a poem with a verse and so on. So, of course, Darwin was very influenced by Erasmus. So, we will make it very simple. What is the evolution by means of natural selection? It's based on 3 main points: reproduction, variation, and selection. This means that the rate of reproduction can be rapid or not, but the important thing is that there is a loss of balance between food resources and environment. It means that there is not enough to eat for everybody. Variation means that inside the same species we have a variability. So if you are looking to us, we are all different. And the characteristics of each individual or group of population has a different adaptability to environment. And finally, we have the selection. So the selection is made by intra and inter-specific competition. And those who make better use of the environment and produce more offspring that survive are the ones that will pass their gene to the offspring. The question is how those mutations are made. Because when you are asking to students how it happened that from two individuals, one other become out and is different. Theoretically, if we were just the copy of our parents, we need to have the half of a DNA of our mother and the half of the DNA of our father. But it's not like this, because of mistake. In the process of duplication of the chromosomes, there are a lot of mistakes. So we have error of deletion. It means that one part will be not reproduced. Duplication, one part will be reproduced twice. Inversion, translocation, and isochromy. So, how does occur the mutation? What is the object of the selection? Basically, the mistakes. So, when two individuals make another one, this new individual can be or not more responsive to the environmental changes. So today, of course, a lot of time passed since when Darwin made his theory, even if still our explication of evolution, but with the actual knowing, we know something more. So the Darwinists today, that is called neo-Darwinism, it's the Darwinist evolution by natural selection theory, plus the Mendel's biological interest and the modern genetic, especially the population genetic. and also the paleontological data, because the paleontological data are the only one that allow us to see in real what does evolution means, with, of course, all the species. And near to the new Darwinism, we have also other theory that help in the explication of some phenomena. We will not go in deep in this, but just some example. It's the neutral theory of Kimura and the punctuated equilibrium theory on Hergé Gould. This theory specifically said that finally the evolution is not linear, like we was thinking, so it's not a progressive phenomena, but we have very long period with any change, and very short period where the environment is changing a lot, where the pressure, selective pressure rates working higher, where we have evolution process. When we say very short period, we are talking about 200, 300,000 years, not 2 days, of course. And so, once we have defined more or less what is the evolution, we have, according to what we have seen, we have to ask ourselves, but today, is this process still acting like it was before? Is this process still acting for the other species or for human? I mean, we are in a complex society and the culture has changed a lot. So it's complex to see today how the natural selection is acting. So a new concept was introduced by this man with an impossible to pronounce surname, so you read, that for the first time defined the concept of social selection. So he was using the concept of social selection coupled with a sexual selection defined by Darwin, saying that culture is something that influences the sexual choice. So, and this is not valid only for Homo, but also for other animals. You know that a lot of birds are constructing nice things to attract the woman. My preferred animal, the sula, that are Galapagos animal with blue feet, they are the best example of social selection because they are attracting their partner by dancing. And the sula is not the most intelligent animal in the world because if they lose their egg and they found a stone, they start to use the stone as their children. Respect to the sula, but. And so, for example, the sula was changing the way to dance, and this has been a process of natural selection and of speciation. So we have two species based on the way how I attract my partner. So the concept of social selection say that the social environment and the social behavior is something that will influence the natural selection. So it's not only the more adapt to the environment that we choose as a partner, but it will be also the more fancy one. And we have a lot of examples in animals, not only Homo, that attest this theory. And we have the evidence, the genetic evolution, so the genetic drift and the gen flow are not the only actor in evolution. And here you have the mathematical prevision of the action of cultural selection and genetic evolution. Someone go further. It's a very complicated argument, this, because it's quite hard to have scientific data to support this. And we have some authors that consider that the selection, the natural selection, is today very low for humans because culture replaces the natural selection. Before, if you were not very strong by the physical point of view, you were not surviving, and you were not have children. And if you have not children, you are not passing your gene to your children. So you are not passing your characteristic to your children. Today, the situation is different because medicine changed a lot our behavior. And some authors are considering that today, especially Chiaris, say that the human species will change culturally, but not biologically. So some authors are considering that today the biological evolution is not so active for Homo. He was saying here that Homo sapiens will be the first and only, probably, species that through its logic-based progress, defies the rationale of natural selection as an evolutionary force. So the question now is how the natural selection is influencing our evolution. And some mathematical studies have been done, according to this argument, to see how culture is important in the selection of a partner. Because, of course, evolution is based on the selection of the partner. You know, all the animals that make, for example, the deer with a big horn to fight for a woman. Hopefully in our society you are not more obliged to fight for a woman. And so if you are strong, if you are nice, you will win. You will make children. But today, these nice horns are replaced also by the cultural position inside a society. Several mathematical studies have been done on the past and in a predictive way to see how the couple are formed. So basically someone say, those are all hypotheses I mean, someone say that there is any relation about the status, the medical status of a partner, but there are a lot of relation with the level of culture, the situation in the society, the money. Someone is stating that money is one of the driver of natural selection today, and so of evolution. So, by the other side, we can ask, social selection prevents gene flow. Gene flow, basically, it's the distribution of the genes all around the world, and it's the one that ensures our variability. Variability is very important if we want to adapt to environment. And also we forget to say one important thing. Today, we are not adapting to environment. We are modifying environment in order to make it adaptable to us. And we can see that finally, no. The gene flow is still very, very important across all the country. And in this map, you can see that people are moving a lot. And this is ensuring the gene flow. So, in this context, the social choice is not related to gene. So, here we will have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, yes, because we start after, to hear you. What is, in your opinion, today, the most responsive to change? So, what Darwin was saying, that the ones who will survive is the most responsive to change. And when we are talking about changes, because before the changes were climatic changes, catastrophic events, now the changes are different because absence of water or things like this. So I want to hear from you the answer to this question, in your opinion, because there is not a correct answer and not current answer. Who wants to start? Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you, Marta. I was just thinking. I will start with just a thought because I'm not sure I quite understand the question. But I was thinking also now this cultural selection. We also need peace. I think we need peace in the country to have this cultural selection. So I was thinking also the country who has wars. Also maybe this is also another type of selection that happens there. So to trying and giving another hints, the most responsive to change is also area where peace or war are happening and where I'm gonna stop there because I'm not going to continue. Yeah, it's somewhere where the adaptation is needed, but also you have this cultural thing that happen that we can change. We can also do mechanical things on us. So that means this is also another type of adaptation and selection. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you are right. In the sense that, of course, the cultural selection and is not acting in the same way in all countries. Because, of course, for example, a stupid example, the country who has a free sanitary care for everybody, there will be any selection at this point. Opposite, because theoretically for Darwin, if you have a pathology, it's better to not transmit. So there we are applying at the opposite, but of course, the level of care different in each country are influencing the cultural selection. Someone else? Sandra?
Hi. I think it's important, the cultural selection, but maybe in a level of reproduction to find a mate, but also we have to talk about the decision of not have childs or descendants. And like this cultural thing make us like don't see the other factors very clear. But for example, now the alimentation, the microplastics, the evolving of cancer. So there is other factors that we don't see, but it can also still intervene in the process of the natural selection.
One important thing that you underline is the things of make or not make children. Because before, everybody was making children, except the ones who have medical problems. Today, you can choose to not have children. Of course, this is a kind of selection, because this choice is related to several factors that are only cultural. Please.
I'm speaking on the social selection you spoke about. I think the most responsive would be based on the changes relating to societal norms and the cultural material, the material culture in each society that is influenced by the different societal norms and societal issues that are there in terms of resources, inequality, and so forth. So I think we are in terms of social selection, I think that could be one of the changes that could influence social selection. And also, when you are saying that naturally people that could not have kids would be the ones with problems. And now society would, in different cultures, for a woman to be recognized by their husband or the family of the husband, it will be them giving birth to the heir, which is the boy child. So I think societal norms are also part of the influences that could be part of the changes resulting to social selection, I think.
Thank you, Shanti. As I know my chicken, like we say in Italy, I have prepared some additional things. For example, this is the graphics about the using of internet in the world. This is a driving of cultural and social selection. See the difference, like, for example, North America, but even Europe. And it's strange to think, because for us, internet is a fundamental thing. We cannot live without internet for 2 days. And imagine that only the 60% of the world is using internet. And you also mentioned women. The red country are the ones where, by law, written in the law, women must ask their husband, are obliged to obey to their husband by law. So this is, of course, also engine of social selection, because it means that women cannot decide nothing; they have to obey, and this is a completely social selection.
I don't want to continue the discussion that we started in Isernia, but how do you apply this to Neanderthal and Sapiens?
We don't know. Neanderthal was better than Sapiens.
Yeah, can you go back?
Okay, who thinks that Neanderthal are better than Sapiens? Who thinks that the Sapiens are better than Neanderthal? Okay, you have no opinion. This is why we have no evolution, because people
They are better, but in their same way.
For sure we love each other.
Some of us have genes of Neanderthals.
Yeah.
All of us. Not all of us.
I just wanted to say one thing. I don't really understand why you make the separation between societal and natural.
Because the before exists.
No. If you think of evolved mammals, they have societal mechanisms. Primates, for sure, have very clearly, and they have a certain dimension of culture, which is not a human culture, of course. They have extrasomatic behavior, and this extrasomatic behavior, you have actually given some examples on attracting females and so on. It's performed, and it's not exactly the same. Of course, there is a dimension of growing complexity in the process. So we are more complex in that sense in relation to bonobos or gorillas, and they are more complex in relation to others. But their level of complexity is already societal.
Yes,
And-
but
and-
it's only in the sexual selection, in the choice of your partner. In our life, the culture is influencing.
You have, for example, monkeys that use salt to put in their food to salty the food, not because of the species, but because of a cultural habit. The extra input of salt will have an implication in the health of these monkeys, which will have an implication in the natural selection, and this is not sexual. So I think, of course, again, we do this at a much larger scale. But, and you can say, in a sense, at a certain stage, the quantity of, level becomes a qualitative difference, and I would agree with that. But I still think that human culture is the way, the natural way for humans to be animals. So the extrasomatic behavior which prevailed in human evolution is the adaptive characteristic, is the natural characteristic. This is how we are natural.
But this is not exactly online with the concept of natural selection made by Darwin, because the rules are today different for our culture. Because all animal has a culture, even Hans, I mean everybody has a culture, and the culture is influencing the social and the sexual selection.
No, but I agree with
But the reason why you die or not are very different in our societies. And die or not is the base of natural selection.
Yes, no, okay, but what I'm saying, you are looking at the scale, and you are valuing the scale, which is important, of course, but in the end of the day, it's the same thing. Societal is natural, and I think it's an anthropocentric idea, which in the fashion of today is becoming very strong. So after we got rid of the Anthropozoic, and we decided, you, the geologists, decided there was no Anthropozoic, we got everything through the back door. So now we have the Anthropocene, we have societal selection instead of natural selection, as if they were opposed. What is the Anthropocene? Oh, we have an influence on the environment. Of course we do. Did we become gods, and are we changing the climate and the universe? No, we are not. But we like to believe that we are the center of the universe. And we like to, again, in science, and this is my reading, again, here, I'm seeing not, in logical terms, I don't see any change. I'm only seeing a change in discourse. And the change in discourse is basically saying, oh, we are different. And we are. It's not new.
But
we are different being natural. This is our natural way of being different.
Yes, but there are some data that are just, with an example that everybody knows. Some data that are complicated to be analyzed, but some are already starting to do it. It's complicated because the data we have are different from each country. But if we take the COVID, there are some already published studies that say in country, because from some country we have not the data, so very low COVID. And now that we start to make the comparison between the normal death and the death in COVID period, some countries have been affected more than twice than other. Not more affected by COVID, more affected by dying. And those countries are the ones who have not free cares. This is a selection. And it's a cultural selection. And if you have a pandemic between any kind of other species, it will be not like this, because the dying or not will be based on your gene and your responsive ability to respond to a sickness. Here, the COVID shows us that your possibility to survive or not, it's money. And this is not natural at all. So I'm sorry, but I think we are in a completely today different situation, not today, since Neolithic. I mean, Homo, it's in a different situation than the other animals. And we add something to the concept of selection, the possibility to survive and to pass your gene. Yes, since when they start to throw.
I would still say, but maybe we are saying the same thing with different words. I would still say that is the natural way, because if that choice had not been taken, probably there would be no humans now.
But
This is also the issue. So It was the adaptive mechanism which produced intensification. And intensification, of course, triggered growing transformations in the landscape, growing mastering of your own survival. Because, well, it's like when people say, oh, the good old days of the Paleolithic, yeah, or of the Neolithic or whatever, when people could die happily at the age of 35, and they didn't get cancer because they would die earlier. So, what I think is anything in life comes with a price. When I say anything in life, is you have preyers and you have predators. So like, oh, such beautiful lions and such beautiful gazelles. Yeah, but put them together, the gazelles won't like. so it's like this. So and people have this sort of new Calvinist approach to things, that we have a scene that we have done and so on. No, we have extended the lifetime expectation.
Not everywhere. In Italy it's 82, whereas some country in Africa with a middle expectation of life it's 42.
Yes.
And
yes. But even what you are having in Africa like that is a result of inequality today, because it's no longer the 42 of the Paleolithic or of the Neolithic.
Yes, of course.
It's the 42 imposed because of, well, okay, I think we are saying the same thing, but I'm sitting on the scientific side and you are in the post-processual one.
First of all, Marta, thanks a lot for your interesting presentation. Which change? You know all that epigenetics actually is showing us as the boundaries between environment and individuals are so blurred, subtle, and so I talk about this, the nature versus culture. That is a fundamental dichotomy, but in my opinion is a false dichotomy, because we need to separate, because we are limited in the also in the process of knowledge. And the question, which change? I have not only the impression, you could check the international social report about the new inequalities, that the selection, not only from today but for now, is societal and cultural selection, but is related to the quality of educational and training institution, to the quality of education. That is the real selection. Today, I use this formula. The rule of engagement are changed. Today, citizenship is not a legal or a problem of rule. It's a problem of access, that is a complex concept to education and training. Another point that I'd like to share with you, also for the debate, nature and culture. During educational processes, culture became nature.
Oh, this is absolutely true. And all the modelization on sexual, actual sexual and cultural selection are going in this sense. There are some articles with modelization on the future 100 here, and they are demonstrating, they are making the hypothesis that is going exactly in your sense.
Thanks, Marta, for your the question that Luis raised is just a general critics that biologists put to us, archaeologists, because we used to emphasize the culture. There's a general view, but we do that now, not in the past, but we do that now on analytical grounds. We need some kind of a general vision to separate that, knowing, and I'm sure that we agree on that, knowing that culture arises during evolution. Then it is a part, of course, of the natural selection. But we need to separate and to understand one and the other to better study our own evolution. But this is, of course, a problem in our research. But it is clear we need this separation to understand what happens. That is different, I think, that from the question of Anthropocene that Luis also put on the side and on the table, that when culture will disappear with us. Culture, when we will finish, for sure, as every species, I hope that we
before
will,
us, before our genes, probably.
Culture will disappear with us. But I'm not sure that the results of our activity on the ecology will disappear with us. If we can demonstrate that these results will not disappear with us, perhaps Anthropocene is something. But it is just one opinion. Thank you very much.
The disappearance, it depends of how long time you take into consideration. Because I suppose that if you are considering something like 3 million years, maybe. Okay, the last one, because after we have to listen for Robert. Charlene wanted to say something? Ah, okay. So it's okay?
Thank you very much, Marta.
Thank you very much.
And now we will have Robert Sala, that you have already heard yesterday morning. Robert is professor at the University of Fiji in Tarragona. He is also an expert in the early human developments in Europe, and he has extensive work in also on important educational sites. And again, you will bring us precisely on the I'm very happy because yesterday there was a warming up now, so thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Luis. First of all, thank you for your invitation to come here once again. Thank you to the community of Março. Thanks to all the organization, Sarah, Annabella, Hugo, and everyone that is working here to attend us and to make all easy for us. I will introduce a absolutely different question, and I will present you the current results about two projects that we are conducting on North Africa, one in Morocco, the other in Algeria, but both in the same main region of the high plateaus in the Maghreb. And this is just to show different ways or different possibilities for human to survive in a changing environment. It is not my interest in categorize each one of these solution or each one of these human communities as better adapted or not. both have been surviving in their own situation, but just to show what happened in that region in two different moments and in two different places. One, the first at the left is the region of Ngaous and Kefsefian in the northeastern Algeria, close to the border with Tunisia, and the other one is the region of Ain Beni Matar Gefeit, that is just in the other side of this region, close to the border with Algeria. This is then the results, the story of two cooperative projects. These are projects that are being in cooperation, one with the University of Oujda in Morocco, and the other with the Centre National de Recherche of Algiers and the University of Algiers. And we have begun to work there, interested in knowing how hominin responded to paleoecological shifts in a region that today is placed in the fringes of the desert, in the semi-arid regions, around 300 kilometers away from the Sahara Desert, and around the same distance to the seashore in Mediterranean or in the Atlantic in the case of Morocco. Then this is a region placed in the connection between these two domains. And what happens here in Middle Pleistocene? You can see here the place for Ain Beni Matar Gefeit and the place for Ngaous Kefsefian, the same region of the high plateaus and saltwater lakes today, and just in the two extremes of this region. You can see here a better picture to show this region of high plateaus and salt lakes that they call it in Arabic call it as Sebha. Good. But what happened during evolution, during the geological and paleoenvironmental evolution of this region? This is today, as I said, it is in between these two domains, but during what has been called the Green Sahara periods, during these periods, this region is influenced by the humid landscapes and the humid paleoenvironment of the times, and the lakes in this region are much larger than today, and appear some connections to other mega lakes, and especially this situation allows what has been called Pan-African evolution or Pan-African connections, and this is for us an interesting question to understand hominin evolution and hominin behavior. We will begin to see that question on one side of mode 2 or Acheulean, discovered in the region of Ain Beni Matar Gefeit. This region corresponds to a place where at the end of Miocene the tectonics of the region created a large basin that has been filled during Pliocene and early Pleistocene by fluvio-lacustrine sediments, and that has been worked by us since 2006, and up to now we have discovered in the main section a paleontological site, Gefeit 4, a paleontological site of the late Pliocene that has allowed us to indicate the existence of a large lake when Green Sahara conditions prevailed in late Pliocene. But in the Middle Pleistocene, in a moment that is up to now not well known, all this lacustrine region has been captured by the Moluya, wet Moluya, and since then the landscape has been changed into a complete fluvial environment, the fluvial system of Sharf-Za, and with its terraces, preserving in some of them lyric materials. Another, corresponding also to the Middle Pleistocene, and other preserve also faunal remains like that that you can see here in the wet hay bank. For the Holocene, it has been also demonstrated the existence of some moments of Green Sahara influence during the humid period of Holocene, demonstrating also in recent times this influence of the Green Sahara periods into the region. Then all that results make us possible to us to understand what happened in the Middle Pleistocene to these communities developing mode 2 in that region. We will see then what Rabat, that is the site in the Moroccan region that we will present here. This is a site included in a fluvial sediment, coarse-grained conglomerate and other medium-grained sands and clays, preserving series with at least 4 levels containing mode 2 artifacts that has been excavated in 2009. This consists of this fluvial sequence that you can see here with at least 4 levels. The 3 upper levels are contained in a series with capped with calcrete, showing then, and this is important, showing an semi-arid condition, that the occupation, the Acheulean occupation of this region have been during a semi-arid period, not a period of Green Sahara. Also, the work on ostracods are showing us that that it corresponds to a fluvial system within a semi-arid paleoenvironment. This is just to show you some of the tools we have. We have a complete chain operatoire. Then the production of tools is in situ. We have also dated this site, and we have mean for the two dating on OSL, mean of 534, more or less 30, and 522, more or less 26. This dating are the 2 sigma of this dating are enclosing MIS 15, 14, and 13. And this is important for us, for sure, to more or less approximate which of these 3 periods we have here. The semi-arid conditions, along with this dating, places the site after the last Green Sahara period of MIS 14, that is in the beginning of MIS 13. Then, through both the dating and the paleolandscape reconstruction, we can precisely situate this site in this point. Then this is after a Green Sahara period. We are outside these conditions of Pan-African movement, and the analysis of the pollen contained in this series, we have the presence of olive tree, then indicating at least warmer conditions than today in a semi-arid region. And also, for us, is important to indicate the connection, the ecological connection with the Mediterranean region. We have, as you can see here, some large cutting tools, but this is not an industry, how to say that, where this is not an industry characterized by LCTs. The number of LCTs is very low, and this is reduced, and also containing a low variability. We have not cleavers, for example. We have some large flakes, but not cleavers. We have some hand axes, but in a reduced number. Then this is not a classical Acheulean site in Africa. We have also some tools showing some kind of predetermination of the flakes without falling in the classical Levallois methods. Then all these data are showing us hominin occupation of this region in the Middle Pleistocene during a semi-arid period, with at least with ecological connections with Mediterranean, without a classical African Acheulean industry, showing us, allowing us to propose that this is not a moment in which all these connections that Green Sahara is allowing were in place. But we can see another example. The example in Gauss Kefsefian site in northeastern Algeria. In that case, the series of Mode 2 or Acheulean is contained in a travertine series in both Gauss and Kefsefian that are around 15 to 20 kilometers away one from the other. Then it is a quite large region characterized by this sedimentary field characterized by the travertine. This is just to illustrate you about the different sites with Acheulian in Algeria, showing an occupation, of course, of the north region, but also, and this is important for us, the occupation of the current Sahara. This is the card with the places for Kefsefian and Gauss Est. These are two places, as I said, 15 to 20 kilometers away one from the other, both in the region of Shotel Hodna, both contained in travertine series, both corresponding to Middle Pleistocene, and in each one we recovered 6 localities for Kefsefian and 5 localities for Ngaus. These are not single sites, but a complex of sites with different localities for each one. In total, 11 localities for that moment. That shows, in our opinion, that shows, especially because the presence of travertine over the Miocene series, this extended presence of travertine for us is clearly the consequence of a humid period for the Sahara. We have not until now dated that these two sites, but especially the extension of travertine, the extension of human occupation with at least 11 localities allows us to propose that this occupation has been during a humid period on the Sahara. You have here some of the tools recovered in one of these localities. Another large cutting tools embedded in the travertine. Other embedded in clays and sands in between different platforms of travertine. Another locality that has been recovered in the Kefsefian zone. And what happens in Ngaus? You can see here the village of Ngaus, the platform, the preserved platform of travertine today, with the 5 localities inside this platform. Some of them with tools inside these shields, and the main locality, the only one that we have excavated, is that one, the locality one in Ngaus, with the Miocene clays in the base, and the site with 2 levels containing Acheulian tools. You have here different pictures showing that site in the sections, and this is special because this, to the contrary, differently from what Robert, this site is clearly, all them, the 11 localities are clearly dominated by LCTs, by large cutting tools. You can see different pictures, also the distribution both in surface and in section. And these are the typical tools for these sites. We have large cutting tools, both hand axes and cleavers. You have here some of them, cleavers, one cleaver on Convewa flake, and in that case we have especially tools in their final shape. We have not the production of these tools. It's just the contrary to the behavior we have in wet rabbit. Then, while wet rabbit corresponds to an open and semi-arid landscape for Aimbrimatar at around 540 kiloyears, and Gauss and Kevsefian demonstrate a humid phase allowing a Pan-African connection. And for us, just the behavior, the kind of Achelian we have in this site is also demonstrating that connection to the main part of the continent. This is just to illustrate, based on the reconstruction, especially made by the team of Drake from London, the reconstruction of the region of Angaus-Kevsefian, how it was during these Green Sahara periods, and how all this region of eastern Algeria was all connected from by fluvial streams that today are absolutely dry, and connecting the zone of Ngaus-Kevsefian to the north with another classical Achelian site of Tiodaine in the central Sahara, in the region of Tassili, that for sure you may know. All these changes, you know well, I will not say anything else, but you know well that the changes in humidity are driven by the winds and the changes in the intertropical convergence zone, making it possible the enlarging of all the Saharan lakes. Some of them are today also in place, like the Chad, but for sure you know that the Chad lake is much reduced of this than this that you can see here. And always Drake and colleagues are proposing, like us, these connections with through the whole African continent during the Green Sahara periods. And sometimes Drake does not agree with this reconstruction, but this has been published and is interesting for us. The reconstruction of this Paleo River, Tamanrasset, call it Tamanrasset, because it is flowing in the whole Algerian region of Sahara, and it's interesting also for Romanian occupation of this region. For sure, the differences from one to the other, the difference between a green Sahara and the current landscape today are very clear. And this may be the situation in the region during the occupation at Ngaus, Kefsefian, but not during the occupation in Wet Rabat. Lastly, just a picture with all the Acheulean sites up to now known in the north of Africa, and how many of them are placed or close to fluvial or lake margins of these mega lakes that have been reconstructed by Drake. And special as a last mention, the zone that we have not studied at Tabalavala, touching it. We have studied the material in Paris, but we have never been there. But it is also close to a fluvial stream flowing to one of these mega lakes, Yachnek Muidir mega lake, and is special because the typical industry called Tabalavala is a kind of industry very restricted to that site. A way to make cleavers that is special for this site. For us, it may be explained during a arid moment when all the connections in the Sahara were cut, and perhaps a population have been reduced to this special place, and has developed a different kind of industry as a way of adapting to new conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Very interesting. So, regarding the humid periods in the Pleistocene, if I understand well, in the Middle Pleistocene there is an arid period, and then becomes humid. Is that so, or I misunderstood?
Yes, it is working? Yes, okay. There have been many humid periods during Middle Pleistocene. During the MIS 15 through 13, there have been at least 3 that have been documented through the study of geological cores in the Mediterranean. That is, especially the eastern part of Mediterranean have been intensively studied through cores, and they have determined several Green Sahara periods. And during this MIS 15 through 13, they have been determined at least 3. But there are dozens of them if we take the whole quaternary.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. So I have some query about the geochronologies. You have shown like ESR dating and also OSL and magnetostratigraphy to establish the relative ages of this area. So, and also you have said that about the palynology of olive tree kind of information. So based on this analysis, which method do you think that is perfect for to date all this area? Like, thank you.
We do not use only one method, because especially from Middle Pleistocene to early Pleistocene and Pliocene, the results are not too refined. Then you have seen that for the OSL we have around 30,000 years of error in the dating. Then we need many methods to put all of them at work and to have a more precise dating. It is impossible to use one single method. It's impossible. That it doesn't work, and especially because some of them, for example, the paleontological site of Gefeit 4 have been we have sampled it for Iazer, and the first attempt was not good, and the samples were not good to have a dating. Up to now we have very precisely the paleomagnetic series. This is because we placed that on the late Pliocene along with the biochronology, and we are making a second attempt for Iazer and also with the beryllium method also. Then we need to apply many methods to have a good precision, and we apply paleomagnetism, biochronology, and numerical methods like Iazer or OSL. We have not volcanic materials, then it is impossible to apply argon, for example, that is much more precise than the other methods. We are also constrained by the kind of sediments we have.
Other questions?
Do you think that the fact, because according to especially your research that demonstrate well that the population of North Africa was much more than what was expected and before when we were expecting, in Senegal, for example, and in the neighboring region, because in Senegal there are a lot of research. Now they are very active archaeologists working in prospection, looking for things. Archaeologists that has made our master. And
some of our friends also.
Do you think that the lack of data of old occupation of Senegal, it's a problem of research, or it's a real thing? Because according to the ecological reconstruction, I mean, they are supposed to be also in Senegal.
I think that Senegal has to have early Pleistocene and Middle Pleistocene occupation. There is first the problem of research. It has we know that for every place, not only in Africa, also in Europe, the intensity of research has been able to produce the discoveries we have. Also in our region, for example, in Morocco, there has not been any other research before us for Lower Paleolithic, for example, and we have making a lot of discoveries because no one researcher has been there before us. But in the question of Senegal, I don't know. It is absolutely that I don't know, I'm not sure of, but perhaps the modern day river has changed and has produced the erosion and the disappearance of many sites. I'm not sure. It is just an idea. Just an idea. We used to face two problems: the lack of research and the erosion and the loss of many sites because modern or recent tectonics or erosional and geological questions. These are the two problems we used to face, and I don't know Senegal. This is just the general view.
Because of course, as you were saying, we expect to have a upbubbling. And do you think that there is the possibility that not everything is coming from West Africa, but we have also one line of diffusion from South Africa? I mean,
yeah, why not? Why not? The concept of Pan-African, at least for me, is just that. It is not to have one direction. There will be many directions, for sure. And from where the first dispersal, from where it comes, when the oldest hominin fossils came from Chad. We are always taking into account the movement from East Africa. But why from East Africa? Or from South Africa, but why from there? Why not the dispersal from Chad? And then for us working in Maghreb, Chad is much close than East Africa, and is easier to understand. For me, it is easier to understand this so old peopling in Algeria, in Ain Boucherit at 2.3, that is very close to the onset of the lytic tools, of the technology, is very close, and for sure we will be able to discover something older than that. And then how to explain it is, for me, it is explained because the first dispersals are not from East Africa, but from around the center of Africa, around Chad. We don't know. During these periods of Green Sahara and spreading all over the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. I would like to ask about one question. Was there any migrational route from the Maghreb region directly to Europe? Maybe if we reconstruct the paleo environment, was there any possibility of a land bridge that connected to have a hominin migration over there?
A migration into Europe?
Yeah, but by hominids.
Yes, it is. The migration into Europe, it is for sure what we have. I will speak about the Acheulean. The Acheulean in Europe, the oldest one is around 07, 06 million years. Then I think it has been exiting from Africa during these special moments of big dispersals during humid conditions, and reached reaching Lebanon first of all, for example, Gesher Benot Yaakov, and then being introduced into Europe. But there is always the idea, not solved until now, of a dispersal through the Gibraltar Strait. Okay, perhaps you are thinking on that.
Yes.
And it has been proposed many times. For the Acheulean, we know that the Acheulean with a more extensive African characteristics is present in Spain. Then many researchers have proposed that the entrance of this classical African Acheulean into Spain have been through the Gibraltar Strait, because we have not this kind of Acheulean in other places in Europe. Here, I think, as Marta said, that this is a problem of research in Eastern Europe, and perhaps a problem with the kind of occupations. But for me, this is too weak as a reason to accept a passage through the Straits. For me, it's too weak. For others, no. That is just a matter of discussion, of scientific discussion. Huh? Just that. Thank you.
Coffee break? Perfect.
Coffee break, short coffee break, 50 minutes. Okay.
Thanks and sorry.
Thank you very much.
We will have a further possibility.
performance of societies. And of course, he's the coordinator of DYCLAM. For that reason, you already know him very well. He's holder of Jean Monnet Chair. He has conducted several things throughout his life, including in intervention in policy making. And so, Robert, thank you very much for being here once again.
Merci, thank you very much. Bonjour à tous encore. Good morning to everyone. So the title of my talk is How to Make Community of with Diversity. And we're just talking with my colleague Adrian Corpadean on that question. Especially in Romania, Russian, and Hungary, and so on. So it is a very actual question, in fact. So I would like to raise some questions on the ontology of Europe. What is Europe, in fact? On the possibility of Europe throughout the transformation of the political, cultural, and perhaps anthropological landscape of Europe. The meta question is, can a succession of treaties negotiated by the states could found a community? It is the basic question, but the response is not obvious. I have prepared a diagram and I will develop some idea of this diagram. If you want to understand what is Europe, what could be Europe also, you are in the center, which I call nomos. Nomos is the European community, the institutional realization of Europe. Okay? Council of Europe, for example, United Europe, Maastricht, and so on. Okay? In blue, you have what I could call the real Europe, you see, or the long-term duration. For example, European features, geography, history, state-national culture, empires, elites, religion, and so on. On the right, you have the events that have marked the history of Europe: wars, conflicts, nationalism, fascism, genocide, colonization, and so on. And here you have the European project, you see, because Europe is, first of all, an idea, in fact, the idea of united Europe. And some great names, Erasmus, Montesquieu, Husserl, Zweig, Coudenhove-Carnegie, Jean Monnet, and so on. Okay. To create a political community, you have to have a telos. A telos, that means an objective, a goal. Wow. For example, peace, democracy, freedom, reason, progress, benevolent governance, ecology. But above all, a community needs a fiction. A fiction is not the contrary of the truth. It's a construction, in fact, a narrative construction. And in our own life, we have each person has his own fiction on what he thinks he is. So this fiction is organized around narrative, cultural, history, legacy, and so on. And the question is the demos. Is it possible to build a demos, a society? So in order to build Europe, it's necessary to build a community, first of all. Etymology can help us. Communio, for example, what is common? Consortium. community of goods. For example, our Master Erasmus has a consortium. And complexus. Complexus means indivision, but also complexity, what is woven together. Tissu. Ce qui est tissé ensemble. This could produce a communitas, with a community institutionalized. But to make a society, civitas, societas, you need what we used to call affectio societis. The willingness to create a link, a project, a goal, and around a community of values, of course. If you take this presupposition into account, you can come to a simple conclusion. Europe didn't exist as Europe, in fact, before 1949 or 1992, the Maastricht Treaty. For example, Julien Benda. Julien Benda was a very great European intellectual between the two wars. He has written a very important book, Discours à la nation européenne. And in Geneva, in September, just after the liberation, you had a very important meeting for all the great intellectuals in Europe. And it is interesting to see what Julien Benda said at the time. There has never been a political unity of Europe, any more than there is a spiritual unity. All attempts at union has failed since Charlemagne, in fact. On the contrary, and particularly since the beginning of the 19th century, after the Napoleonic episode, one observes the will of Europe to be disunited and to form nations independent of each other, which it speaks. So, it is the long term of the history. So, there were European countries, of course, but not a European community. When I heard Europe and colonization, okay, but what Europe? Some country, Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, for example, but not Europe, in fact. And you know that the First World War was the tragic result of this anti-European politics in Europe, in fact. So it's not easy to define what is Europe. Is it an idea or even an ideal? Ideal. If Europe has existed, it was as an idea. An enlightened elites dreamed of European community. And I will take only 3 examples. The more recent, Hilda Monte, very unknown person, but very important, feminists, Jewish, European federalists, exiled in London, where she wrote this book, The Unity of Europe, so actual, in fact. But unfortunately, because she was Jewish, she came back to Germany, Austria, and she were killed by Gestapo. Montesquieu, consideration on the universal monarchy in Europe, or Duc de Sully, perhaps the first, who dreamed of a European federation. For him, it was the only solution to deliver Europeans forever from the fear of these bloody catastrophes so common in Europe. So are we in the 17th century or today? Because today, that's it. Bloody catastrophes are coming back to procure for them an unalterable rest, finally to unite them all by an indissoluble bond. Sorry. You see? So it's so actual, in fact. Today, it's strange because Europe is an ideal, of course, but for the countries that are not in the EU, for example, it is in Tbilisi, in Georgia, in March, of this year, or Zelensky in Brussels in February of this year, for example. Strange paradox. Of course, Europe has been a space of cultural, religious, and economic exchanges. Think of the monastic orders, for example, in the Middle Ages, for example. Here is the map of Cistercians expansion, for example, you see. So, or we can speak about the Enlightened movement in the 18th century, or the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. But Europe has not existed, institutionally speaking, as a political community. Alors, the causes are very complicated. Perhaps the depth of the national feelings, psyche, for example, the nationalistic phenomenon, which was a European invention, in fact. It is a paradox. Third point, to build Europe, it's necessary to go beyond, and not to deny, of course, national communities. And it is a big deal. Because the modern Europe has been constituted around the national, or the ideology of nation, in fact. So it's the French Revolution. Louis was speaking about for the introduction of this seminar. So the nation became the impassable horizon of political communities in Europe. Modernity, citizenship, nationality. But what is very strange is that if you go to Brussels to visit House of European History, what's very strange is that the chronological account begins with the French Revolution, which was, in a certain way, the contrary of Europe, of what could be Europe, you see. But you say it's difficult to create a story, a museographic story. And the House of European History is very controversial, of course. Many polemics. As I said, Europe likes to be against itself, you see. So it's a feature of Europe. You see, for me, the dark years begin in 1922 with the fascism in Italy, and end in 1945. Because the absolutization of the nation drives to nationalism, ethnic nationalism. For example, the First War, but also the racial extermination. And it is a map of the Europe of the camps, of the concentration camps and extermination camps. You see? So, it is Europe in perhaps 1944. And after 1945, we dream to go beyond the nations. And I will cite a very interesting historian, a British historian, very well known at the time, now almost forgotten, Arnold Toynbee. Arnold Toynbee said European nations can only survive within the framework of Europe, and Europe can only flourish if the nations that make it up retain their identity. So, is it possible to build a community on the base of multiple loyalties? That is the question, and it is always the question. We're talking of Hungary, of Romanian, of Austria, and so on. It is the problem of today, in fact. And his book, it was a roundtable of Europe organized by the Council of Europe in Rome in 1953, and he has just published this book, The World and the West, very interesting book. I would like to present what I call the 4 geopolitical areas of Europe. So you have nation here, Europe, Atlantic, Occident or West. During the Cold War, we said West. That means Canada, United States of America, Latin America, Europe, except Russia, USSR. Sorry. And Europe today is shared by nation, Europe, the European project, and Atlantic Ocean. And you have the world around, you see. You have the world around. These delimitations are theoretical and porous, of course, very porous. For example, we could take the example of the arts, music, for example, or digital phenomenon, for example, you see. But nevertheless, it is a reality. And according to Edgar Morin, it looked like an holographic principle, you see. It's why we were taking yesterday evening with my colleague, Professor Domenici. The parts are within the wall, and the wall is inside the parts. It's like DNA, for example, or la vache qui rit. La vache qui rit, it's a very good example of what is an hologram, in fact. Or the album of Pink Floyd, Medal, for example. No, not Medal, the album just before Medal. So for my next point is dedicated to what is a community needs to become community. One must share values or a telos. A telos, for what for? European, after the Second War, and it is a revolution, wants to revive a humanistic anthropology of universality after the catastrophe. And for me, the very historical date event is not the speech of Robert Schuman in May 1950, but the creation of Council of Europe, May 49. Great Britain, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Italy, Ireland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. Germany joined 1 year after. In fact. So we have a Council of Ministers, a consultative assembly, but the essential for me, it's 1 year after the European Convention on Human Rights and just after the European Court of Human Rights. I think this constitutes the community of values that emerged after the catastrophe of the Second War. Community of human rights, rule of law, peace. The Maastricht Treaty adds economic and social progress, for example. The Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is organized around human dignity, freedom, equality, solidarity. But we can say that Europe has invited the idea of human rights, for example, and equality, before the law. For example, the Magna Carta in Great Britain, habeas corpus, Bill of Rights, French Revolution. You see, it's not something new. In fact, it is part of what Europe brings to the world, in fact, and to change the rapport between the relation between the states and the individual, and the relationship between individual and states. The wish of Immanuel Kant has been realized, in fact. You see that the philosopher pleads for a European confederation around rationality and juricity. And let me quote Kant. I call a nation European as long as it admits a constraint in conformity with the law, consequently a restriction of freedom by means of universally valid rules. So it's so actual, so fundamental, in fact. But I will read the question, European or universal values? Can we say that these values are proper to Europe? The problem is that just after the war, UNESCO has been created, you know, and these principles, who were European principles, became universal. And if you go to, if you look at UNESCO, and you can, and I'm speaking to, especially to Louis Osterberg, because he's member of the International Council for Philosophy and Humanistic Studies, for example. So it was created just after the war. Or the International Commission for a Scientific and Cultural History of Humanity. I am working on this subject nowadays in the archives of UNESCO in Paris. And this commission has created the Journal of World History, a very unknown initiative, but very important, in fact. And you can see an archives that I have photographed in UNESCO. So, and Lucien Febvre, who was the leader of this movement, a French historian, said, we are all in the same boat. All nations are in the same boat, none that has not lent, that has not borrowed. See? And if you go now to UNESCO, you have a little exhibition just after the entry, and you can see this book. Nous sommes des sans-mêlés. We are half-blood. Half-blood. It's a manuscript that were totally unknown and rediscovered recently, in fact. And of course, 1948, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, 5 points. To create a community, we need a nomos and a nomen, in fact. But, first question, how to make community with it a constitution? I don't know if you know that the project of constitution has been rejected in 2005, because, or thanks to Netherlands and France. So, how can we make community without a name? No name till 1902. How to make community with the coexistence of 6 communities, which creates 6 multiple loyalties. For example, nowadays you have the European Union, 27 members after the Brexit. You have a very big institution, the Council of Europe. You see? 47 minus 1. Who is the one? Russia. Great, thank you. So we are 46 in the moment. But, as we said, Armenia is has big problem with Azerbaijan, for example. So, are we unit or not? Schengen area 26. Romania is not included in Schengen. For example, because we have Adrian, who represents, if I can say, Romania. Euro area or zone, eurozone, it's the money. Only 20. Romania, to take the same example, is not in euro zone, but Romania is in United Europe. So it's very complicated, you see. The last one, very unknown, European Economic Area, 30 members. So, you see, it's complex or complicated, I don't know. But how to teach Europe, you see, to young people, and how to explain Europe to people who are not intellectually equipped. You see, very different. And for me, it's one of the causes, the main cause of the rejection of people. And I think it could explain the populism that is growing throughout Europe now. 6 point, what is the relationship between community and identity? To make, there is in fact 3 ways to make Europe. First, making Europe through economic. So it was the project of the fathers of Europe, Jean Monnet, Gaspari, Adenauer, Spaak, and so on. They wanted to create interdependence on an economical point of view. You can make Europe through the institution. So it was the project of federalists. They say, to make Europe, you have to create a very big structure, and the reality will develop around this institution. So it's a kind of state building, in fact. And you can make Europe through culture. It was the project of some federalists, as the Swiss, very important thinker, Denis de Rougemont, founder of the European Center of Culture in Geneva in 1950. But the name is very important. He wanted to create the European Center of Culture, but not the Center of European Culture. You see the difference? And it is the big problem. I will take the first official declaration of the European Commission in 1973. Declaration on the European identity. In Copenhagen. All the complexity of Europe is in this sentence. A very long sentence, very complicated. Desiring to ensure respect for the values of a legal, political, and moral nature to which they are attached, anxious to preserve the rich variety of the national culture. You see, a rich variety of national culture. But what is common? Well, the same conception of life. Well, it's, what does it mean? Based on the desire to build a society conceived and realized in the service of man, they intend to safeguard the principles of representative democracy, the rule of law, social justice, okay, and the end of economic progress, okay, and respect for human rights, which constitute fundamental element of European identity. But as I said, are they specific European value? No. But the question remains, in fact, how to combine dialectically national culture with the supposed global European identity that is, in fact, became an universal value. National culture, European identity, universal value. How to combine that? To create a proper identity. 7 points. To create a community, we need a storytelling. In fact, a storytelling. And what I would design by instituting fiction. In France, it could be une fiction instituante. Une fiction instituante. C'est-à-dire une narration. Et, sorry. My theory is we are all in a instituting fiction of ourselves. Oh, so, it is not easy, of course. Jean Starobinski, a very important Swiss thinker also, said in these meetings of Geneva in 1946, he said he has at that time he was 25 years old. You know, very smart guy. The good and the bad Europe are one of the same reality. Not only the glorious history, la grande Europe. We must guard against the thesis of pure idea of Europe which would remain intact, untouched, unalterable, identical to itself. So, very important. But beside this, there is a very bad experience. The European Commission asked to Jean-Baptiste Durosel, a very famous French historian, specialist on international relations, Jean-Baptiste Durosel, who was also the ghostwriter of Jean Monnet. The memoir of Jean Monnet was written, in fact, at the beginning by Jean-Baptiste Durosel. And the European Commission asked to Durosel to create an history of Europe as a professional historian, not a politician, you see. And it is this book which is called l'Europe, Histoire des peuples. Europe, history of its people, translated in 8 languages. But the problem is that Jean-Baptiste Durosel presents Europe as a myth, as a kind of insocialized reality, predestinate entity. And the European Commission has to withdraw from this project, in fact. It was a very big polemic. So, my question is the history of Europe impossible or forbidden, in fact? You see? As I said, the House of European History in Brussels, 10 years to be created, 10 years. 10 years of tension, 10 years of polemics. Many 30 historians has participated to this project. And in the official site, you can read from myth and discoveries to the chaos and cohesion of the 19th century. The House of European History takes visitors on a journey along the path of Europe's history and challenges that to complete its future. And the main object here is the symbol of the Industrial Revolution. Because there is, in fact, 2 factors of transformation of history for me. First, the idea, but it's not a hierarchy. Idea, a project, but also the which I call the reality, economical reality, technological reality, and technological, mainly technological reality. The good example is the Industrial Revolution, or nowadays the digital revolution, who transform our life, our way of thinking. They are transform who we are. It's not only an artifact, not at all. They transform our ontology, in fact. But nobody has decided to transform our manner of thinking. Nobody is, except some conspirationists. But it's the auto-deployment of the reality, of the technological reality. So this project, as I said, has been, for example, another project, the House of French History, inspired by Nicolas Sarkozy, who was president of the French Republic. So it is at the same time, you see, we are going to create a House of French History. And I have a very close friend of mine who were leader of this project. And I hesitate, we have many dinners together, and I was not in favor of this project, in fact, even if I hesitated a lot, in fact. But it declared the difficulty to create a collective, accessible, and cohesive story of a community. And I think it's valuable to every community. So this raised the question about the interference between history, identity, and collective memory. And heritage belongs to this collective memory. And my last point is about a substitute, what I call a substitute narrative, and especially cultural heritage. There is a kind of paradoxical injunction. If you read the Treaty of European Union, well, it's not easy to do, but you can touch the reluctance of the authors to pronounce on culture and history. It is incredible, but it's like that. The preamble said, for example, desiring to deepen the solidarity between their people while respecting their history, their culture, and their tradition. So we begin to speak about what is different between us. And in an article, we can read, the community shall contribute to the flowering of the cultures of the member states while respecting the national and regional diversity. At the same time, bringing the common cultural heritage to the fore. You see? It is the beginning of, it is the emergency of the cultural heritage as a symbol of what can unite the European beyond the diversity of nationalities, diversity, and so on. And here is the dialectical tension of Europe. To understand Europe, it is necessary to combine the antagonistic principle, for example, community or universality, unity or diversity, nationalism or federalism. So you have to find a solution to resolve this tension. It's not the case now. So, is European heritage can unify the community? You have some initiatives, very interesting initiatives. For example, European Capital of Culture, Cultural Roots, European Cultural Label, very important because it is dedicated to the European heritage. The first one, in fact. And it is operational till 2011. And the European Year of Cultural Heritage. But you see, cultural heritage, but not European cultural heritage. And it is a map of the label today. Very interesting. I don't remember if we speak about that in our lessons. I don't know. See? Yes, a little bit, yes. Yeah. So, I have to finish. So, how to construct a European narrative that make community an heritage that the citizen identifies with. But historically accurate. Because I'm historian, I'm academic, I'm not a politician. So, how is it possible? And here you have a statue, a very beautiful statue, that is in the middle of the House of European History. You see, I don't know if Edgar Morin could say that is a good example of the complexity. But it's strange to represent Europe by that monument, you see. So how to interpret these monuments, I let your imagination go on. So, I finish with the first diagram, but the ultimate question is the demos, le peuple, the people. How can Europe make itself loved? It is a simple question, but a very important question. And thanks to my colleague, my Italian colleague, and our conversation, I add this slide in my PowerPoint. To love Europe, one must love complexity. It's very difficult. On the sense of Edgar Morin and Denis Rougemont. Because for me, Denis Rougemont was a very big inspirator of Edgar Morin. But is now almost unknown, almost forgotten, unfortunately. But how to make people love complexity? Two very important books of Edgar Morin, La complexité humaine and Penser l'Europe, Thinking Europe. Very important book. A little book, but very important. Because Edgar Morin has changed his manner to see Europe. At the beginning, just after the war, he was against Europe because he said, Hitler promotes Europe. In fact, but of course, it was an anti-democratic Europe. So he said, for me, Europe was not the good world to recreate a democratic community. But it changed a lot. In fact, it changed a lot. And I will end by this sentence of Paul Valéry, a French philosopher. Perhaps my students know this sentence, because every day I have to think about this. And I think you have to think about this. Everything that is simple is false. Everything that is not simple is inefficient. So, how can we escape from that? And it is it is why Europe is not popular nowadays, because you have to learn to love complexity. But even in the real life, if you want to love a girl or a man, we have to love his or her complexity, his or her difference. And it's not simple. So thank you very much. Luis, I would like 1 minute to speak about a book. A book which has been written by the students of DYCLAM, the last promotion, with some scholar also. It's called Patrimoine, Péril et Résilience, and we analyze the threats of two cultural natural heritage wars, tourism, terrorism, pollution, abandonment, and the policies that are put in place to repair, rebuild, reconstitute, or restitute. It is the phenomenon of cultural restitution. So. with an original zoom on the UNESCO blacklist, you see, the list of endangered heritage. So, and it's a pleasure for me to have permit to the students to be published. But our student has done very great thing, notamment with Le Corbusier and with Bartholdi, the author of the Statue of Liberty. So I will congratulate the student. I think we can applaud them. Okay. Thank you for them.
Thank you very much, Robert. We had a very, very interesting and stimulating intervention now. But as we are at 12:30,
Sorry.
I would suggest Adrian to come
Okay.
to have his own presentation, and then we'll try to find some moment for discussion. But I could not stress more than Robert that this participation of students in the publications is very important. And all you will do is you are doing the same.
So Adrian.
Adrian Corpadean is professor.
Tu as besoin de...
He is one of the coordinators of the master department as well, and I would say he brings into this consortium the approach of strategic contemporary policy making and understanding of interactions in our society. Of course, you understood also through the words of Robert that all of us are interested in that, but I would say that Adrian is more directly committed to this, and so I thank him a lot for being here today, particularly knowing that he just came, and then he will just leave, because and he comes here after having been in South Africa. So it's traveling all the time. So thank you very much, Adrian. The word is yours.
Thank you as well. Thank you very much, Luis, for this very kind invitation that you've extended to me. Well, I will speak about a topic which is of very heated importance. I do have the presentation. Let's see. Yeah, but I sent it to Luis. So do you have it? Luis, have you copied the presentation?
See, I did. It's inside. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you so much.
I do things immediately, otherwise I forget. If I don't do them immediately, I forget. As happened with
All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, so I've prepared this presentation with a colleague of mine, Professor Mihaela Oprescu, who is an expert on international law, and you will see how this is relevant when it comes to the analysis of the conflict triggered by the Russian Federation on the borders of the country that I live in, which is Romania. But the stakes here go a little bit deeper than analyzing this. The stakes go towards the perceptions in Romanian society, as well as in concrete political and international action taken on the part of the Romanian administrative bodies with respect to this conflict, which was largely unexpected and a massive game changer, not only with respect to the foreign policy cultivated by the countries in the region, but also, first and foremost, with regard to the perceptions and to the changing views of otherness in a region that has very, very much been affected by the twists and turns of recent history. So I will try to speak at the level of society, but also at the level of foreign policy commitment as well as action, and also to see to what extent a dramatic event like this one can trigger previously unknown or unexplored social attitudes, and to see whether Romania was actually in need of such a conflict to finally understand what its larger neighbor cultivated in terms of international commitments, because unfortunately this is typical of countries that lay beyond the Iron Curtain. We very often have access to the West. We are very comfortable with speaking to our colleagues from Portugal, from France, and Italy, and countries with which we have so many connections, but we barely understand our own neighborhood. We barely understand Ukraine. We understand Moldova a little bit better, but much better, we'd like to think. For a variety of reasons, which I'm going to be very, very happy to share with you. We do not understand the Western Balkans. The name Western Balkans is yet another thing coined by the European Union, like East Central Europe. We didn't really know that Romania was in East Central Europe before the European Union told us, but we accepted it. It's not a problem. Luckily for us, the Faculty of European Studies, which I'm very pleased to represent, is very much connected to the political realities, to the international relations of the region, and we've had a lot of inputs on the part of the diplomatic corps from Ukraine. We have regular meetings with the Ukrainian ambassador and diplomatic staff in Romania. We have regular meetings with the Moldovan ambassador, as well as with the President of the Republic of Moldova, Maia Sandu. We've interviewed Maia Sandu for this particular research and presentation, and we've been able to understand a little bit how the broader perceptions in the region have shifted following the Russian invasion. So this presentation is the product of more than just the typical research methods that we are familiar with in political science and international relations. It actually encompasses a lot of direct observation. And whether we like it or not, Romania is on the front line of what's happening. There are a lot of refugees that are coming our way with their narratives, with very interesting life stories as well as professional stories. And we've also attempted to make the university a pole of absorption of the brain drain, which is leaving Ukraine right now, which is happening in Ukraine right now, as well as in Moldova, in order to see what can be salvaged from this brain drain, and to what extent Romania can become an intermediary point while this conflict is ongoing. So the premises of the relations between Romania and Ukraine are ample. They are massive. They are geographically and historically valid. We have a very long border, a non-EU border, which has to be secured, and Robert mentioned the fact that Romania is not fully partaking in the acquis communautaire, and it's not. Romania has been meeting the criteria to join the Schengen area since 2011 without any kind of fault. You can see there is no bitterness in my saying that. Yeah? But it's obviously a political game. We understand it. We have to do better, of course. But in the end, the decision lies a little bit out of reach with respect to the Schengen area. With the Eurozone, we are completely at fault. With the Eurozone, we are 100% at fault, because there were so many consecutive years when the macroeconomic indicators would have enabled Romania to join, to make this commitment to the financial policies engendered by the Eurozone, and we failed to do so. You can imagine that our inflation rate right now is no longer in keeping with the Maastricht criteria. And this is a euphemism. It's actually very, very worrying at this time. So coming back to Romania and Ukraine, there are a lot of shared communities, if you will, on the border between Romania and Ukraine and beyond the border. This is a very, very important point that directs the relations between the two neighboring countries. And then there are so many things that history has a way of not teaching, unfortunately. This is typical of the region, of post-communism. There are things of history that are simply not taught. The fact that we're not teaching history, okay, we're not rewriting history. Somebody else is doing it a little bit more towards the east. But the fact that we're not teaching history doesn't make it go away. And there are two things that Romanians do not learn about its history pertaining to Ukraine. First of all, the Ukrainians' ample contribution to our war of independence against the Ottoman Empire, where indeed the Russians were the allies of Romanians, but there were a lot of Ukrainians who shed blood in order for this independence to happen in 1877-78. And secondly, the fact that the Romanian pro-Nazi army, under the command of Marshal Ion Antonescu, committed one of the most horrifying genocides in modern history in the city of Odessa. And this compromised the relations between Romania and Ukraine to a very, very large extent amid this pro-Nazi commitment of the Romanian government at that time. Bukovina is a very, very rich territory, which I'm going to be very happy to pinpoint on the map, which includes multilingual communities, which includes shared customs, and which includes a lot of heated arguments on both sides that have been very well played by the Russians in order to stir the waters in the relations between Romania and Ukraine. Then there are very concrete conflicts. Snake Island, you remember Snake Island from the first days of the war, and there's a famous line that was uttered, I can't say it now, in Russian on Snake Island, that became a motto of Ukrainian stark resistance against Ukraine. You know what I'm talking about, of course. There are even postage stamps with that line. There's the Bystroye Canal, which is still a very, very heated bone of contention between Romania and Ukraine in the Danube Delta, which is one of the most beautiful natural monuments in Europe at this time, dare I say. And then there is the fact that there's been so little talk at diplomatic level. The treaty was very late. In 1997, only in 1997 did Romania finally sign a treaty with Ukraine, but the treaty dodged many of the border disputes. And then you have an entire rhetoric on the Ukrainian side, but I wouldn't be very much prouder on the Romanian side either, of whether we were actually at a military level likely to engage in conflict, to the extent that in 2009 the defense minister of Ukraine said that if there was an attack coming against Ukraine, it was more likely coming on the Romanian part. For Bukovina, for the unresolved historical chapters. And on the Romanian side there was a lot of skepticism, but here you have to understand the difference in foreign policy commitments. Romania has had a very shaky transition to democracy with a lot of ups and downs. But there were two constants that were always followed, sorry for the plainness, that's a constant, yeah, it's in its very nature, by the Romanian governments, and God knows there were a lot of them. NATO and EU. And these were unshaken foreign policy commitments. And the pyramid of needs quickly explains to you why NATO came first. Because first of all, you need to have security in order to be able to develop at a socio-economic level. Ukraine was not like that. Unfortunately, both Ukraine and Moldova have had a lot of shifting attitudes in this very delicate balance between East and West, which is untenable. Unfortunately, very recent history has proven that this balance is not really possible in the geopolitics of the region. You see in a shade of orange, whatever, the historical region of Bukovina, which is now shared between Romania and Ukraine. And therein lies the beauty of multilingualism, cultural practices and customs that are shared between the two countries. And we're very, very proud that these customs are kept and that there is a lot of dialogue, there are a lot of EU-sponsored projects at the level of the communities residing on that region. Then you have a picture of Snake Island. Snake Island does not belong to Romania now. It belongs to Ukraine, but the continental shelf or plateau, if you will, around Snake Island chiefly belongs to Romania. And this is very rich in fossil fuels. So Romania had to go to the International Court of Justice in The Hague in order to actually resolve this topic. And then you see the Bystroye Canal with a shade of green, which poses a threat on the biodiversity of the Danube Delta, which is the youngest land which is still being formed in Europe this time. We can talk about that, it's very interesting. You also have, according to the case brought forth by Romania against Ukraine before the International Court of Justice, you have the delimitation of the continental shelf around Snake Island, where Romania proved successfully, it was actually the current foreign minister who was the principal advocate for Romania during that trial, it proved that Snake Island was not, in fact, an island, was just a rock. Hence, it was not habitable. So the Ukrainian side did its best to prove that Snake Island was actually, in fact, an island, an ostrov, if you will, but it was not the case. Romania was able to prove that it would not play such an important role in the delimitation of the continental shelf. The importance of ethnic communities is undeniable. Ukrainians make up an important, a sizable part of the Romanian population. The results from the latest census are not officially in yet, but I can tell you that there is a constant presence of the Ukrainian population on the Romanian ground. And Romania has been pretty inclusive. This has been part of the protracted negotiations led by Romania with the European Commission during the course of pre-accession. So Romania completely altered its legislation with respect to national minorities, and I dare say it could be seen as a model of integration of national minorities, although there's still a lot of work to be done, especially with respect to the Roma people. So with Ukraine, we have permanent seats of all these ethnic parties that have no chance of crossing the electoral threshold, so they have permanent representation in the Romanian Chamber of Deputies, which is very good because amid the shaky balance of Romanian politics, these deputies have very often played a significant role in Romanian politics. And that's good because they've pushed forward pro-minority legislation. The same goes for the right to have an education in Ukrainian language, and the same goes for the fact that Ukrainian language per se is recognized as a minority language with all the educational and cultural rights that stem from that recognition. Unfortunately, Ukraine has not reciprocated. There is no parliamentary representation of the Romanians, some of whom declare themselves as Moldovans, but in actuality, they are of Romanian descent. So in Ukraine, they make up 400,000 people. So there is no parliamentary representation. Dual citizenship is still not recognized, and Romania is still negotiating with the current Ukrainian government the recognition of the right to have a complete educational cycle in Romanian. Now, we understand why Ukraine is not very, is reluctant to accept these claims, and that's because the situation of the Russian language is very thorny in Ukraine at this time. But Romania, unfortunately, has fallen, and Romanians have fallen as a collateral victim to this situation, and there is constant dialogue between Bucharest and Kiev in order to resolve the matter. Prior to 2022, you would have had a very, very hard time looking for a more hostile attitude within the European Union of any nation with respect to Russia than Romanians. Okay, there are a lot of explanations that can stand as testimony as to why this long-term hostility has been around, most of which refer to the communist heritage. Communism was always seen by Romanians who exhibit major cultural and historical and linguistic differences to Russians, but communism has always been seen as an exogenous system, so a system that was artificially implemented by the Russians as of 1945 in Romania, and communism benefited from little to no support on the part of the electorate. So Romania being lost on the other side of the Iron Curtain against its will, against its cultural fabric, was one of the most dramatic things of this part of Europe in the 20th century. And we still hold a very, very, very massive grudge against Russia for implementing this system. Then Romania has major political interests with respect to the Republic of Moldova. The Republic of Moldova is made up of many people who have a Romanian citizenship, and according to the Romanian constitution, Romania has to protect its citizens wherever they may lie. This is very problematic in the current state of affairs, with Transnistria being a thorn in the back, first of all, of normalcy and democracy in international relations, but then it's used once again by the Russian Federation as a frozen conflict zone in order to stir the waters and prevent Moldova, who is now pro-European, massively pro-European, from coming closer to EU integration. Then Romania has been a stark enforcer of the sanction regime proposed by Brussels against Russia, to the extent that, for example, in 2014, Putin bragged to the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, that it would take him 2 days to reach not only Kiev, but also, amongst other capitals, Bucharest. Well, it takes more than 2 days, but this is the level of discussions on the borders of the European Union that are happening in the 21st century. The former Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Rogozin, actually said that Romanians, like Moldovans, exhibited pro-Nazi tendencies, and that, he used a lot of comparisons to the animal kingdom in order to describe the Romanian government at that time, simply for enforcing the Brussels decided regime of sanctions, and Romanians did not allow an airplane that had as one among its passengers this Dmitry Rogozin figure, simply because this would have been against the sanction regime. They almost ran out of kerosene. There was a massive scandal, and once again, the same rhetoric emanating from the Kremlin was directed against Romania. Maybe you're wondering how Romanians react to this kind of rhetoric, usually in the same easygoing nature that has characterized us as a Latin people. There is absolutely no perception of threat. Maybe I would say in a naive fashion, in a gullible fashion, there is no perception of threat under the shields of NATO and the military presence that we have on the borders with Ukraine, on the not immediate but in extenso borders with Russia. But still, to see this level of rhetoric is outrageous. The onset of the war, triggered by the Russian Federation against the sovereign state of Ukraine, prompted an unexpectedly quick and thorough mobilization of the Romanian people beyond what would have been expected from the Romanian government. And this stands as testimony to a certain type of maturity, in my view, of this Romanian people that saw to it that the Ukrainian refugees were well looked after, that border trafficking became very, very easy. Actually, border trafficking was far easier on the Romanian side than on the Ukrainian side, because very quickly the Ukrainians prevented men who were able-bodied and possible conscripts from crossing the border. And on the other hand, the Romanian authorities made a point of welcoming Ukrainian refugees as quickly, as efficiently as possible. We would not have expected that, because Romania was on the point of demonstrating to the EU how non-porous these outer borders of the European Union were. But they made an exception. They immediately instituted a set of protocols that enabled the Ukrainian refugees to find safety or to seek safety in Romania. Until now, there are more than 3.2 million Ukrainians that have crossed the border into Romania. But as you can see from the statistical data made available by the Romanian Institute for Statistics and by the Romanian Border Police, Romania is merely mostly, for the most part, a transit point for Ukrainians. We do not speak similar languages. The degree of mutual intelligibility is almost none. Ukrainians traditionally seek refuge in Poland, and many of them have attempted to find better jobs in Poland, much like Romanians have in other countries that share linguistic traits with Romanian, like Italy or Spain or France and so on. So very few Ukrainians have actually remained on Romanian ground. However, Romania did open up its access to the labor market. As you know, for non-EU residents, access to the labor market is heavily restricted by norms stemming from the freedom of movement of the single market. But Romania tried to negotiate with Brussels a much easier access to the labor market, to the extent that more than 6,000 Ukrainians have become temporarily employed. This is a very low number, actually. At university, for example, we have special places for Ukrainian students right now in order for them to keep going with their studies, and then we're going to issue them with a transcript of records so that they can, at the end of the war, they can go back to their home country and obtain their diploma in time. So, military assistance, as opposed to humanitarian assistance, has been quite modest on the Romanian side. And you may wonder why. This is actually a question that is quite prominently addressed in Romanian mass media, in academic discourse, and so on. On the one hand, the Romanian military is still being prepared for NATO standards. We are actually very much reliant on a permanent American presence on Romanian soil, which there is, with the anti-missile shields, with a permanent presence at the Black Sea, with warplanes and so on. So Romania doesn't really have the military capabilities, although it is spending 2% of its GDP on defense, to share these military capabilities with Ukraine. We do share certain military capabilities, but Romania has made a point of being very discreet in this regard in order not to complicate things for its smaller neighbor, the Republic of Moldova, in order not to put a bullseye too much on the broader region, which is being severely threatened by the aggression. Because as you know, for example, the territory of Moldova has been crossed by Russian missiles heading towards Ukraine, which is yet another violation of international law. One more on the very, very long list. The political measures taken after the beginning of the Russian war against Ukraine were ample. In the international bodies that Romania is a part of, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has attempted to support the Ukrainian cause with concrete measures. For example, before the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly, there has been a vehement condemnation of the invasion by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've also made a point to immediately reject the so-called referenda in the occupied regions, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia, in order for the international community to understand that there would be no recognition on the part of Romania for these illegal annexations, much like the case of Crimea. Please remember that the case of Crimea, unlike what Russian propaganda says, was not triggered, and the invasion by the Little Green Man in 2014 was not triggered by the fact that Ukraine had announced its will to join NATO, which is a defense alliance. But it was triggered by the fact that Ukraine had accepted to ratify the accession agreement, the association agreement with the European Union, which is not endowed with any military connotations. So again, Russian rhetoric says one thing, and in actuality, Ukraine has a sovereign right not only to become closer to the European Union, but also to choose its military alliances. This is stipulated by the constitutional documents of the United Nations, inter alia. Then, Romania has co-initiated a variety of resolutions before international bodies, including the General Assembly of the United Nations, in order to fight against the illegal annexation of sovereign Ukrainian territory. For pragmatic reasons, the food program, the World Food Program, was supported by Romania in the Ukrainian file to grant humanitarian assistance, and also grains leaving Ukraine have been able to be transported through Romanian ports on the Black Sea and the Danube, because as you know, Ukrainian ports are not safe for transportation. There have been bilateral visits. The practice of bilateral visits has proven to be very, very significant in the eyes of the Romanian people, of Romanian society. And this is the reason why the presence of President Iohannis in Kiev, together with the leaders of France, Germany, and Italy, in June last year, proved to be a game changer for how Romanians perceive their neighbor, because they understood the importance of the involvement of Romanian authorities there since the head of state chose to make this visit. And then, of course, energy security was another main point of Romania's intervention at international level. Romania itself not being dependent on Russian fossil fuels at this time, unlike some other countries in the region, like Hungary and so on, that have exhibited different tendencies with respect to the condemnation of the Russian invasion. The zenith, if you will, of the political dialogue between Romania and its neighbor came on the 4th of April last year, when something that would have been almost inconceivable, borderline inconceivable, happened with President Zelensky's address before the Romanian Houses of Parliament. And Zelensky did what he does best. He touched upon the right notes. Yeah, he sang the right notes that would resonate with the Romanian people. This was so astute, but it seemed natural. There was no criticism in Romanian mass media and in Romanian society for the comparisons between Ceausescu's regime and Putin's dictatorship. Zelensky mentioned the Republic of Moldova and its plight at just the right time in his discourse. He made a lot of cultural and historical references. He referred to the sanction regime that was heavily enforced by Romania. So this was a typical Zelensky moment, but it was incredibly welcome by the Romanian society because it enabled Romanians to see that he was tangibly close to Romania and genuinely thankful for the support that the country had offered his. And then there were a lot of other diplomatic measures that were very important before the International Criminal Court, and you've seen that this bore fruit to the extent that the file on war crimes, including the deportation of children, was supported officially by Romania with an intervention together with 42 more countries in March of last year before the International Criminal Court, hinting at crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed on Ukrainian ground by the Russian army. Then, Romania intervened before the International Court of Justice and before the European Court of Human Rights in the files that Ukraine had initiated against the Russian Federation. We've also added a voluntary contribution to NATO funding, and as I've told you before, we've taken some economic measures in order to facilitate the transit of cereals, the transit of products that Northern Africa, for example, is very, very much dependent on. In terms of Romanian perceptions related to the war, this is a survey that was conducted by a reputable institute for statistics called INSCOP, in June of 2022. The first question, who do you think is chiefly to blame for triggering the war in Ukraine? As you can see, the vast majority of the Romanian population placed the blame with Russia. Second question, who do you think is going to win the war in Ukraine? The same dose of optimism that has always characterized Romania's stance with respect to the West, to NATO, to the EU, is very much exhibited by the result of this part of the survey, where Romanians are for the most part convinced that it is in fact Ukraine that is going to emerge victorious. And these perceptions have not changed, quite to the contrary, I would say. The more we have a Western presence in the region, the more you have the American presence, NATO mobilization, the more Romanians become supportive of the idea that Ukraine is indeed going to emerge victorious. You can see it in academic cooperation. We've collaborated in the past year more with Ukrainian academics than we did in the last 20 or 30 years. We've participated in more online conferences in Ukraine than I think that in 20 or 25 years. And this says a lot. Unfortunately, there should have been no need for this to recognize and to open up to the alterity provided by the Ukrainians. But sometimes in the region, learning is a very harsh endeavor. It's very difficult to claim that there are conclusions to this. I'd just like to point out the fact that the change in perceptions exhibited at all levels of Romanian action and society and academia towards Ukraine amid the plight triggered by the Russian invasion has been major. Then, the question was whether Romanians were supportive of Ukraine simply because Romanians were against Russia, or genuinely because they were chiefly supportive of Ukraine, in favor of Ukraine. And my analysis and Mihaela's analysis from a juridical standpoint inclined towards the latter. There's much, much more than just the usual apprehension of Russia, which has always characterized Romanian foreign policy since the 60s, I would say, since the invasion of Czechoslovakia, since the Prague Spring. There's much more than that. In fact, you can see that in the fact that Romanians never cast blame on Ukraine for inflation, cost of energy. The Romanian defense minister had to resign simply because he said that there should be at one point negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. He resigned because he didn't follow the rhetoric, the complete rhetoric, which adds solely based on the principles wished by Ukraine. So you could consider that the narrative exhibited by Mr. Dâncu was very close to the official one that the Romanian government portrays. No, in fact, people are extremely sensitive with respect to these nuances, if you will. And finally, I think the ultimate proof of maturity on the part of Romania is the fact that it has supported the fact that Ukraine, okay, and Moldova, package deal, not Georgia yet, are now recognized as candidates to EU integration, which involves a complete new level of dedication, which involves different commitment on the part of the instrument for pre-accession and so on. Why is this indicative of maturity? Well, simply because Romania is still in dire need of EU resources from the big policies that engulf a large portion of the budget, the common agricultural policy, yeah, and the cohesion policy. And the reconstruction of Ukraine is going to take up a lot of resources that could otherwise go towards Eastern Europe. If this is not proof of maturity, then I don't know what is, but I'm very proud that this enables Romania to contribute to the war effort, a war in which, while it is unlikely to be dragged, is still costing heavily and has shaped now an entire way of thinking of Romanian society. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Direct question you want to raise now, please do. Yes.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Just one quick question. Does Romanian's government has all the help that they give to Ukrainians population recently decided to find a way to help the Ukrainians to preserve their cultural heritage that is obviously threatened by all the bombing of their cities?
Indeed, Romania has offered shelter, if I can use this terminology, for Ukrainian tangible heritage. Okay, so there is a transfer of items from Ukrainian collections that will be deposited on a provisional basis on Romanian territory. The Ministry of Culture of Romania has engaged in negotiations with their counterparts in Ukraine for this. And at academic level, we are now hosting Ukrainian professors and researchers for the intangible part of this heritage, and we are providing them with work contracts, again on a temp basis, which is very commendable, I think, because they are treasured additions to our academic community. I can give you 3 examples from the Faculty of European Studies that I'm pleased to represent, where we've greatly enriched the research potential with the help of Ukrainian colleagues. So it is happening, it is being done at this level as well. Romania should know how this goes because in the First World War, Romania's national treasury was basically deposited, sent on trains to Russia and never to be seen again. So Romania understands the threat to these very important patrimonial objects.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation. Okay, so about the war in Ukraine and everything, I think, as you've said, like the view of the war is very optimistic and maybe a bit naively optimistic that we talk about when Ukraine will win the war. We talk about reconstruction and everything, but there is also a possibility of Russia winning the war, and that may be very dangerous. So I haven't seen any discussions of what will happen if Russia wins, and then obviously they will try to extend their territory more and would be much more dangerous. So is there any preparation in case Russia wins the war?
Okay, well, first of all, optimism is what keeps us going. That's a fact. It's a defense mechanism as well, which is typical of the region. It's overcompensation for the hardships of communism. There are many other explanations. Nobody knows exactly what the definition of winning and losing the war is, either for Russia or for Ukraine. In theory, winning the war for Ukraine means keeping its territories. What about Crimea? This is very difficult to state once again. Romania has made preparations in the event that something goes wrong And in the event that it is to share, again, on a temporary basis, a border with the Russian Federation, there is an anti-missile shield that is protecting the territory of Romania right now. There is an acquisition of Patriot missiles from the Americans, F-16 jets from the Portuguese, from the Portuguese Air Force, through NATO, of course. There's a permanent military presence of NATO on the Black Sea, as well as in many other parts of the country. So Romania is prepared for this. But the thing is that in the event that something goes wrong, we are very, very worried about the Republic of Moldova, and because the troops, the illegally stationed Russian troops in Transnistria, have no way of replenishing themselves and their resources, so they are stirring the waters big time. And also because many Moldovan citizens rightly have the Romanian citizenship, many of them. This is a historical reparation, it's absolutely normal. So we are very worried in the event that there is a new wave of refugees. The fact that Russia should win the war, the conquest of Kiev and so on, this is unthinkable. At this time, nobody in their right mind in Romania is advocating this publicly because it would spread panic, but the government does have plans, and the military plans of NATO are stronger than they've ever been, I would say, in the region. Thank
you. Sorry. Could you reassure the students who are supposed to go to Romania in some month that there is no risk for them?
Romania is as safe as the beautiful place you are in right now. I can tell you that much. It is absolutely impossible, inconceivable that there would be a security risk for you in Romania. By the way, you are going to Transylvania, yes, which is the risks come from mythology and literature. Yes, they do. Yes. Yes. No, there is honestly absolutely no trace of any security risk in Romania at this time. NATO membership is a very, very strong guarantee.
And the French army. Who can protect you.
We come from a very long tradition of collaborating with the French army. I was just talking to Robert about the contribution of the General Belot during the First World War in building a Romanian army, because the Romanian army was on horseback with sabers and swords, and we ended up being amongst the winners of the First World War, thanks to the help provided by the French. But when you come to Romania, you will see how impregnated it is with French culture, French, words, French way of life, and French food. Yes. Speaking of food.
Yeah.
So now we go for lunch, and we resume at 2:30. It will be a session coordinated by Stephen Hartman, that is somewhere there. And I sent to all of you, or hopefully to all of you, I may have escaped one or two emails, addresses, a file with poems that Stephen sent me that will be used this afternoon. Okay?
2:30, we start.